Hello out there, and welcome back to My Grocery Adventure. This is a podcast for people who want to make an impact. My name is Carly Wharton, and I am your host. If you are listening only, do know that you could also see our faces. You could join us on the YouTube channel. Feel free to subscribe and comment. I would love to hear your thoughts on this episode and any others that you check out. Every bit of your engagement helps push these out into the algorithm so that other people can find them and connect with them as well. So thank you so much for all of that you're doing. Today's guest, I'm so excited for you guys to get to meet her. I mean this with all due respect. She is an absolute glow stick of a human being. I just absolutely adore her energy. And with that, I would like to welcome to the podcast, Marci Penner. Thank you so much for being here. How are you today?
I'm good. Hi, everybody.
Welcome, Marci. Do you want to start by telling us just a little bit about who you are and the work that you're doing right here today before we dive back into your whole story?
Yeah, I'm the co-director of a nonprofit, Kansas Sampler Foundation, whose mission is to preserve and sustain rural culture, which gives us a lot of latitude. And I've been doing this for 30 years. And the reason I say that is we're a little bit in a transition phase ourselves. We've added a co-director. And the reason I'm bringing this up in my bio part here is because I'm taking co-director Sarah Green to every incorporated city in Kansas over the next 4 years to get that kind of training. I mean, Sarah's already has a wealth of knowledge and experience and network, but to go into every community to talk to the people in their environment makes a big difference. And this includes going into grocery stores, which is why I bring it up. And, to walk the aisles, to talk to the clerk, hopefully the owner, is a lot different than just seeing a Facebook post or something. So, I've gone to every town in the state a couple of times to research for guidebooks, but this time it's more to ask about the health of the community in terms of, does the community like itself? Who are the leaders? Are young people involved? What's going well? What are the exclamation marks? Where are you stuck? How can we help?
Mm.
So that's just a little bit of where we are right now, where I'm at right now.
Gosh, I adore your work, and I can't wait to hear the life that brought you to it. Because from the little bits that I know, it seems very organic in the way that it just kind of like unfolded itself. I don't know if you would agree with that characterization.
Well, Dad and I started 30 years ago, and the first thing we did was go on the road to write a shorter guidebook. And the road work is where it was the launch for everything we did. From there, we realized that Kansans didn't know their own state very well. So 3 years after that journey started, we formed the nonprofit to educate Kansans about Kansas in a way that would produce an audience, a thoughtful audience for rural communities. And the other thing was that we found one community would be doing something really great, but there wasn't a way to share it. Back then in 1990, pre-social media, everything, there wasn't a way to share it in a way that other communities could utilize the information. So the nonprofit was about how to share, how to network and support those rural communities with their excellent grassroots ideas, or to help people know what the issues were, the people that could help them, the rural advocates. Right. So there had been a big disconnect, especially through the volunteer-led communities. There wasn't a way really to connect that well with state agencies or organizations that really did want to help. So anyway, 30 years, lots of things have gone on. Our offices are located on the farm that I grew up on, which will be 150 years old next year. I say offices, but it's been 2.5 staff, part-time bookkeeper for many years. And just now, thanks to a support from Patterson Family Foundation, we've been able to add 2 more staff. But the way I'd like to say it is, this grant allows us to support rural communities better. And one way we've done that is by adding staff. One of those staff, her focus is to work with Power Up's 21 to 39-year-olds who are rural by choice, which is how I met you in those interviews. Yeah. I mean, anyway, a short version of many years of working with rural, which my passion just grows every day for this work.
I love that. So like the work itself is life-giving, right? Like energizing, like kind of pulls you into it further and further and further.
That's right. And you use the word organic, and, I just follow the pull of what's needed. And it is life-giving for me, and hopefully for rural communities and their people. Things are most beautiful when they work both, the mirror effect. So
sure.
I'm not in this just for myself. That would be a little boring, as I know, same for you. So to see your work connect with people on the other end.
Yeah.
Is where the life-giving part comes in.
Absolutely. And I feel like this audience, I mean, it's a podcast for people who want to make an impact. Like how you go about doing that. I mean, that's the subject of many, many conversations that we could have. But yeah, to see your work connect in the lives of real people to make a real difference in the quality of real people's lives. Like, I don't know what better form of payment there is. Like, I lost interest in money quite a while ago, and like that's really what I'm in it for, is like impact. I want to make a positive impact.
Well, I'd like to say to the listeners or viewers, what a special podcast interviewer we have here in you, Harley. I think sometimes it takes younger people a long time to get to what you just said. And so I want the people listening to know that this podcast is only being done to further the cause of getting groceries into small towns. It's not an easy task. So, Carly, thanks for the reasons why you're doing this.
Thank you. This is why I call you a glow stick, because you can't help but just light other people up. You just take yourself around like this butterfly and share light with everyone you meet. I've received it many times, and yeah, thank you. I'm so glad we met through the Power Up interviews, and that you have somebody dedicated to that full time, because yeah, I mean, these people that have made that choice, that of course I could chase money in the big city. I did that. That's what got me out of the illusion that money is fulfilling. I had to burst that bubble for myself, and I'm thankful that I got to do that. And then I decided like to pivot, and let's orient ourselves towards something that actually is fulfilling and making a difference in people's lives. Like that's hard to beat.
Well, I think you're attracted to the need and the possibility of helping.
Exactly. The puzzle that you're describing, of like, you see the pieces, you see this need, and you see the resource and the gap between them. And like, I've called myself a bridge builder many times, like that. I just want to make the connection, and then mostly I want to move on and make another connection and make another connection, Yeah.
And the beauty is we learn from each bridge, so the next bridge gets even stronger. I
Totally.
think people see rural communities as sometimes as a dying demographic, but I see them as potential. Um, and some of the most passionate people live in these towns because it's not always easy to sustain them. So those that are, working like crazy, they have this spirit that just is pretty amazing. And anyway, the bridge building, the networking, it just gets stronger and adds on and adds on. And hopefully the listeners can become part of that as well.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, with that, I would love to jump back and hear, where were you born and where did you grow up?
Right here on this farm, which is Inman. So we're 5 miles outside of a town of 1,100, in the middle of Kansas, 50 miles north of Wichita. And, I graduated from Kansas University, eventually went to University of Wisconsin to get a master's in counseling and guidance. 5 years in Wisconsin, 5 years in the Philadelphia area as a elementary guidance counselor, coaching as well along the way. And then back home to Kansas in 1990, not originally by choice, but a medical reason. And I'm kind of glad that, because I became rural by choice.
Mm-hmm.
I loved growing up rural, but I didn't know that I loved it until it wasn't part of my world. And then I came back to it, and it took me a while, travels with Dad and talking to people, to really see how much there was to love and to choose.
Yeah.
And so that phrase currently describes me as well as anything, to say I'm rural by choice and Kansan by choice.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
have lots of warts in
It's a
Kansas
journey.
and rural,
It's a journey. Yeah.
but without the friction, how would we find forward movement? So, which means something different to everybody, but
Yeah.
uh,
You
yeah,
said
so
that.
I'm back full circle to where I started, only with a different, richer perspective.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I feel like I've been on a similar journey. That full circle
Yes.
part is kind of a big deal to get the fresh perspective on just how beautiful it really is. And I wonder if you would share, you say you loved growing up rural. I wonder if you could paint a picture for people who just have never lived in a place like that. Like, how many people were in your school class? Let's start there. And like, just kind of paint us a picture of what does that mean to grow up rural?
Yeah. I love this question because I don't think anyone has asked me this, maybe in forever. Way to go,
Yeah,
Carly.
yeah.
There were 4 in my first grade class. And
I was
4,
not expecting that. That's really
and it sounds like back in the one-room schoolhouse days, but
exactly.
it was a 2-room schoolhouse through 4th grade. And then anyway, eventually consolidations of country schools, and I graduated from Inman High School with 37. And I didn't know that was small. I didn't know we might not have everything. I could play. They didn't have girls athletics until my junior year. And I was a little bit rabble rousing about that. So that was my first activism in helping that happen.
What did you do?
I wrote every principal in the league saying why we needed girls basketball. And I guess I should have first told our principal that I was doing that, because I got in trouble. But within a year, our superintendent became our first girls basketball coach. So that turned out okay. But nowadays, what I hear is that, kids get to play every sport because they're in a small school and they get really good attention. And, the community raises you up and knows you. And, I think even today, being raised rural, what it meant to me was when we had a walkout at school one day, I think because the boys won some sporting event and there was a walkout. Not sure why we had the walkout, but for me, what I did with that option of all the things that I could have done on walkout day, I chose to come back to the farm and pull nails we were taking our barn apart. And that's what I wanted to do. And I grew up me and my two siblings, we had a empty chicken house, really 3-room, large, big building that we turned into a cafe and restaurant and dirt room. And my imagination, that's where my imagination became, just grew, and I could do anything.
Sure.
With an imagination. And I think the biggest thing was that I got a good base of love from parents, but just this groundedness on this dirt, on this 150-year-old farm.
Yeah.
I've loved living elsewhere, but I can only be content on this dirt here. And we didn't know that the grocery store, we had one, yay. We didn't know it was small. You don't know what you don't have.
Right.
So
Right.
I loved my childhood, and I just want young people to be able to go, fly away, do whatever they want. But I want to help make communities that are appealing enough that they want to come back or stay in a productive way.
Yeah.
And you don't always see those things as a kid. You only know if you feel good, accepted, all those things. And we can work on all sorts of welcoming features and expanding our minds and our leadership. I didn't really notice those things as a kid, what was going on in town. I just knew how they impacted me.
Right. You just enjoy the fruits of it. Like,
Yeah.
great. Yeah. But it takes,
Or get frustrated and write letters.
I, I'm so proud of you. Like, it's just part of who you are to like speak up and use your voice. Like, hey, this is a gap and I think we should close it. Like it's just kind of part of who you are, it seems.
No one, yeah, and you don't know maybe that you shouldn't do that. Or,
Why should
I just thought I want something so badly. How to get it, or what's the process? What's the journey? I've got to try.
Yeah.
So anyway,
I'm a big believer that, there's so much out there selling motivation to people, but really, if you want it bad enough, you don't need anybody to like get you motivated. Like the desire for the thing will be all the energy, all the fire you ever need to get yourself there. And sometimes like it is a little bit of anger or injustice. Like was it a sense of this isn't fair? This shouldn't be a thing. Like we should have,
yeah.
this should be equal.
And I think maybe the other side, the readers of the letter, were maybe attracted to the passion, and maybe it opens some awareness that, yeah, maybe it's time for girls to get to play as well. So, but I think it's important to share your passion in a constructive way that's palatable to the other side. And I wish I had that letter still. I really do. I don't know what it sounded like.
Oh, I would love to see it. Maybe it's like framed in some school somewhere and we'll come across it. Um, oh, what do you mean by palatable? I think that's a good advice as far as just it's important to be passionate. It's important to have your own viewpoint, but you can't make an impact if no one's listening, like,
or if you say it in a way that turns them off to the extent that they just want to crumble the paper or dismiss you totally,
yeah,
or you can't let, I was going to say, you can't let the emotion be the leading force in the letter, but then the passion. Yeah, so I don't think that's right.
it's like
But
a balancing act.
it is.
Yeah.
And that's maybe what palatable means in this case, is the balancing, but to say things in a way that people feel like they can respond, whether it's what you want to hear or not. Like my principal called me into the office and gave me a talking to. So it wasn't palatable to him. And so the other thing is everybody hears your argument or your plea differently. And so maybe you have to read the room, figure out how each audience can hear best.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What if you had gone, I mean, this is total speculation, but what if you had gone to the principal and he had just been totally not receptive to the idea and absolutely not, you're not gonna email the rest of
Wow.
everybody else, like, or mail it, I guess it wouldn't have been email probably, but like that you're just not gonna do this. Like if you had checked in with him, like maybe, what's the right way to do it if there is such a
Wow.
thing? Like what if he had squashed it?
Yeah. I mean, he had let me bring in a radio station that did donkey basketball. And so the thing was, the radio station came to Inman High School to play the girls, and he let me make that happen. So there was a thing, some room there. But what if he had said no? I think I would have dribbled a basketball around his office for days on end until he gave it in. It was a life for me to play basketball.
Yeah.
And it just wasn't fair.
Yeah.
On the second country school I went to, we didn't have enough boys for a softball team. It was softball, not baseball. So they let me play with them, but they called me Freddie because they didn't want the other team to know I was a girl. I mean, they knew, but they didn't want to. I don't know. I can't remember the details, but I was Freddie. I was a
Freddie.
shortstop. Yeah. They
Freddie
didn't
the
hide in the
shortstop.
right field. So
Oh
I
my
think this
gosh.
might be going in a direction you didn't anticipate. So we
I love
can.
it. I love it. No, this is exactly my style. Um, were there any other girls or were you the only one that wanted to play with them?
Oh, it wasn't wanted to. It was they couldn't play other teams without enough players. I
Ah,
think I was the only one. They probably only needed one more,
huh.
or hopefully other girls would have had the chance too. But
Yeah.
um,
So interesting. Um, yeah, so okay, so then you graduate from a high school with 37 people, and then you decide to go to KU, University of Kansas. Is that what you said?
well, I went to Fort Hays for a year, Fort
Okay.
Hays State, and played basketball and softball. No scholarships at the time, and I wanted to play better competition. I don't know if better is the right word, but so I transferred to KU to play for Marion Washington, who had been an Olympian, and she had quite a resume, and I just wanted coached up tougher. And so that was why I transferred. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. I went through 9 different majors until I chose till I finally had to stay with radio, TV, film because it was time to choose.
Yeah.
But it was injuries from being on those teams that altered my direction, which led me to Madison, Wisconsin, which turned out great. You know, at the time it was the most horrible thing, but it turned out great. And then a barbell accident in the weight room changed my direction again, which eventually led me home to Kansas. So best barbell hit to the head ever, because it brought me here. Literally, I wouldn't be here without that barbell falling on my head. So I joke about it, but it's just true how life creates turns. And I learned to have a different passion with each turn. Like, I loved being an elementary guidance counselor.
Mm-hmm.
It became even better than coaching and playing sports myself. And then the barbell thing got in the way with episodes, and I came back to Kansas. And with the work now, it involves coaching, it involves counseling in a way, it involves the passion of sport, the passion of being a teammate.
Sure.
You know, you have to be a teammate with these communities. You can't be an expert to come in and just say, this is how it is. I love the team aspect of our work. And so all those things in the life of a person, if you find that palatable way to keep going forward, and still find passions within you. To me, passion was really important. And I guess I had the opportunity to live my passions. Sometimes people don't have the opportunity, maybe, but I'm lucky enough to have made it work somehow.
Yeah. Well, you say that you would have dribbled the basketball around that guy's office until he let you do it. So, I mean, it kind of sounds like you're going to just do your passion thing until there's a path for you to do it. Like, persistence? I don't know.
Yeah, some of the persistence, the dribbling forever, has manifested itself in not giving up on these rural towns when maybe we'll call them higher ups would just not see the same need to work with them. And this was decades or, years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So in this 30-year spectrum, I've seen a lot of changes how people perceive rural, but we did a Kansas Sampler Festival that we designed for the smallest of towns. Every initiative we've ever done is designed so that the smallest towns can be part of it. And then if the bigger cities want to jump in with us with the way we're doing it, that's great, but we're going to design it
Mm-hmm.
for the 75% of the cities in Kansas that are 1,500 population or less. And probably of those 75%, probably I'd say 70% of those 1,500 or less, 65% remain volunteer led, which means no paid city administrator, manager, no paid chamber director. It's all on the shoulders of volunteers to figure out how to sustain your town.
Yeah.
To have a town, you need to have a city clerk. You need some form of city government, but city clerks are in the top echelon of underpaid people in the state, and they're so busy. I wouldn't put it on them to figure out how to sustain a community, though some of them volunteer to help work hard for their community. Offenders.
Yeah. How many, you said you're taking your new co-director to all of the incorporated towns in Kansas in the next 4 years. How many incorporated towns are there in Kansas?
There's 627.
I knew there was like 100 and what is it, like
105 counties.
105 counties and 627
incorporated, which means they have a form of governance.
Okay.
Some people think it means they have a post office, but that's not necessarily true. So when Sarah and I, we do a county at a time and we pick them randomly. Last week we were in a county that had two towns of about 2,200, one town of 400, and about four towns of 100 or less. And we try to talk to someone in every town. And, so you get a full spectrum, and that could be I don't want to go into that in detail, but it's different than hearing, oh, there's towns that are volunteer led that don't have one business in town that, they don't have a water tower. It's different when you're there to see it and to talk to people.
Yeah. Yeah. When you see their real living conditions, essentially, like what is it that you're really living with?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's hard to get if you're not gonna just like stand where they're standing physically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you can be so impressed that even though with what you see, you wonder how anyone could love this town. And then you find out there's a lot of people that do, and they have dreams for the town.
Sure.
So in one town we went to, we drove down Main Street and it looked like the town had had better days, but they did have a great cafe on the highway. And we asked the shift manager, what can you tell us about your town that we can't see when we drive downtown? And so she started telling us about their dreams and their goals and things they were working on that you couldn't see from Main Street, from the drive. So don't judge a town by that windshield tour or that windshield impression, of just driving down the town.
Sure.
There's usually so much more going on.
Yeah.
You have to ask.
Yeah.
You have to see, you have to feel it. One town we were in, the post office staff person is really the town counselor. And unofficially, but she said, the older people come in and they're so lonely. They are so isolated here. And they talk to her and sometimes it's just seeing her smile.
Yeah.
But she checks on them.
Yeah.
You learn a lot doing we're only 27 towns in, but it's been so informative. 6 hours to go. It's awesome.
Gotta bite on it. Okay. One step at a time. Like I love that. It's such a big goal. A 4-year goal. I'm a big fan.
I've done it. This is my third trip to every town, and it's a bite-sized tour, but that's what informs our work.
Right.
That creates our knowledge base.
Wow.
That creates our passion and our open hearts.
Mm-hmm.
And, we try to go into every grocery store and then you notice how many towns don't have grocery stores.
Right. No. It's quite a few. And like what you're saying, so many of the towns have teeny tiny little populations. And when that's the case, having a grocery store there is sometimes, like they say, not cost effective. Like if there's only 100 people here, we can't run this whole big expensive operation and make it make sense. But that's where, we are seeing some different options happening where there's more collaboration between stores so they can share more things and basically bring down the cost of operating it and like do so on a smaller scale. So there's innovation happening. And that's like what you're saying, I think, is like the people in the towns, like they may have so much life bursting out of them, even if the town kind of on the facade doesn't exactly give you that impression,
Yeah, and we're trying to get a good contact in every town. So when you and the group and others come up with solutions that could be helpful to,
Right.
hear what you've come up with. And then on the other side, it'll be, now which town fits this best?
Right.
And then tell you and the Rural Grocer Initiative, Erica and Ryle, and put the team to work.
Yeah, exactly. Make the connection, share
Yeah.
the resource.
Yeah.
And that's like the beautiful thing that I have learned from working so closely with RGI, the Rural Grocery Initiative, is that there are so many resources already out there. And it is so often just a matter of like making the right connection and finding the right resource. So your work, their work, other people's work in this vein of like making those connections, bringing the resources together with the people who need them, like that's something where basically what you're saying is that all you have to do is go to the town and ask a couple of very great questions. I mean, I'm not discounting the questions, impressive, but you're just listening. You're just like showing up and listening.
Mhm.
And like all of this is coming out of it. And you say like you have to feel it. Do you consider yourself a pretty intuitive person? That like when you talk to someone and like when you talk to lots of people, like you're getting something bigger that like
Yeah, because a lot of people say, well, who do you know to talk to? And because we'll talk to a variety of people, you have to be pretty in tune or intuitive with who it is, how to approach them to get their trust. So they'll tell you anything of meaning. It's the more you do it, the better you get. But one thing I've been thinking, especially after last week's tour, is um, a food, like, there's the mobile library. Could there be a mobile food truck, grocery truck to some of these towns?
mm-hmm.
And what would that take to make that happen? And it's not that easy just throwing food. And I think they've tried it in places, but some of these towns, these older folks, they just can't make the 30, 50-mile trip.
Right. One thing that I have seen that's really cool are temperature controlled grocery lockers. So you would put like a set of lockers in the community center or, wherever it's easily accessible. And then maybe a grocery store 30 miles away, you're placing an online order that they're shopping for you at the store. And then they bring, every Tuesday and Thursday, they come and load up all the orders into these lockers and you have the combination to your locker. You pop it open and like there's your groceries. And those lockers, they're not cheap, but way cheaper than a whole grocery store,
So
like
it's
those.
office box.
Exactly. It's like you get a little combination that the system is like resetting for each customer, and you just type in your little code and it pops open your door, and there's your groceries that you already paid for online when you bought them. So that was something that I saw demonstrated at the Rural Grocery Summit, June of 2022. They were talking about that was one of the models of kind of the central grocery store. And then there's this small community 20 minutes away. Some of them don't have transportation. A lot of them don't have transportation. And so rather than putting in some other kind of store, they bought, I think it was like $200,000 worth of these lockers to put over there. And now they can just deliver groceries to those lockers that are more easy for them to access.
So who paid the 200,000?
I'm pretty sure it was like the store itself was on reservation land, and the reservation spanned both of these areas, like where the store actually was, and then this other one. And it was like the reservation recruited the grocer to come in and kind of take over this store. And so the grocer paid to renovate it, I'm pretty sure. But then the tribe put the lockers. If the grocer was willing to do the operations, why would you not sell that many more groceries? But the tribe, I think, invested in those lockers because of the population not having much transportation access.
Right. Oh,
how cool, right?
Marty, I missed that session at the summit, but oh, wow.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Ideas. There you go.
I have some, yeah, we'll talk more about that.
I would love to hear, like you said that you did the road work with your dad, like that very first time that you guys went. Like what was the lead up to that? Because it sounds like it was your medical issue that brought you back to Kansas. And so then like how did it unfold into you guys are going to do this road trip thing?
Yeah, you're good.
I want to know.
My dad had Penner Earth Moving, and then he got into the irrigation business, and then he felt bad about he felt kind of bad in a conservation way about water. And so he decided to do something he had always wanted to do, and that was to write and photograph and record the sounds of Kansas, photograph Kansas in the prairie. And, you know, he had, I mean, his story's so interesting too. The only son on a farm, so you're supposed to be the farmer.
Right.
But he had, I'd say, more artistic, and he had to push those aside until at some point he was able to say, hey, I'm finally going to do my passion. And so he and a neighbor woman did these photo essay books, and people would say, how do you get to the places in those photo essay books? When I came back to Kansas, the only job I could hold because of the medical was with my dad. On my good days, we would start traveling the state to respond to that question. How do you find the places in your photo essay books? And so we didn't go to every town in the state for that first guidebook, but, you know, we just started traveling the state in a way that I had never done up until that point of my life. I mean, as a kid, mom and dad would take us on explorations that were fascinating, but, you know, not that often. It was a treat.
Sure.
So dad wanted to respond to that question too. How do you get to these places? And a guidebook was the way to do it. So his publishing company, which had published those 2 photo essay books, we did three small guidebooks before we became a nonprofit. And so I want the listeners to know that when we named ourselves Kansas Sampler Foundation is usually reserved for those that have private money to spend, to give away. We probably shouldn't have used the word foundation because we were a nonprofit that needed donations to survive, grants. So dad, then he was willing to help go with where my nose was going. You know, as we followed our noses for a while, people asked us to do programs about what we had found in Kansas. And we did tons of programs. And then, you know, we had a book signing party for the first book on our farm. The book came out in November, so that's when we had the book signing party. And we invited some places in the book to come set up a booth under a tent on the farm. And of course, it was a rainy, sleety, snowy, icky, cold, drizzly day in November, and 1,000 people came. And they were so hungry to know about Kansas that we gave the event a name, the Kansas Sampler Festival, to provide the public a sample of what there is to hear, see, do, taste, buy, learn in Kansas. And we had the event on our farm for 7 years. 7 more years. So after 8 years, 8,000 people parking in our alfalfa field, we had to rotate the crop. And so we started finding communities around the state who would host for 2 years. And so forth. So, but we did that event in a way that the smallest of towns could be honored with their explorery attractions. We didn't just need the big tourism attractions of the state. We wanted these explorery attractions that Dad and I figured out would help keep people going from town to town. There weren't big things, but there were those smaller, quirky, nuanced, delightful, charming, personal, scratch your head, laugh at, or smile at, plus all the good local foods, local cooking in the.
Totally.
I think I ended up far away from your question. I'm not sure.
Oh no, it was how that first one came to be. And I love that, how again it was so organic of he wanted to photograph and write, and so he did that, and then the question, and oh, that's fun, let's answer this question. And like it just really is like one little breadcrumb at a time, that you don't have to have the whole grand scheme figured out.
Right. We had no idea where it would go.
Right.
We just were. And it was a great thing to do with my dad.
Yeah, I can't imagine.
Imagine just traveling the state, asking your dad every question, like, why those fence posts, those are made out of Osage orange hedgerow, why are those metal? And why are there different numbers, strands of fence on,
I'm sure he loved it just as much as you did. I can only imagine.
Yeah, it was great.
Oh, yeah. And so is the Kansas Sampler Festival, is that something that still goes on?
After 27 years, we decided to convert from the festival, where what that had been was all communities would come to one spot to set up booths, and the public would come to one spot to get information. We decided to convert to the Big Kansas Road Trip, where we put people into action and would choose 3 counties and help people actually explore.
Sure.
Spend money, interact with locals, dare to do dirt, not judge a town, all these things that were part of our Kansas Explorers Club tenets, principles, whatever. We wanted to help put those into action with that event rather than just get a brochure.
Yeah.
Because sometimes they get a brochure and they'd never go to the places. So we used the Big Kansas Road Trip as a 4-day magnet to get them to come to 3 counties that aren't normally thought of as tourism meccas.
Yeah.
They are. We wanted to give the public firsthand experience in rural communities. And we just asked the towns to be good at being themselves, because we didn't want to tax them. And the public wanted to see them as they are.
Sure.
Who are you? How do these small towns work?
Yeah.
And it's become a beautiful thing.
Am I doing my math right? Was that like a COVID inspired transition?
No, it was a few years before that, but we just felt the Sampler Festival format was starting to get a little, I don't want to say stagnant, because we had lots, almost 10,000, I think, at the last event.
Wow.
But we felt like we wanted those people to interact differently with Kansas, more impactfully.
Yeah.
In a way that would stick with them.
Yeah.
In a way that would impact communities differently. And even though they go to 3 counties a year, you kind of get addicted to what these rural communities can offer. And so the hope is that they'll go exploring more the rest of the year.
Sure. Just kind of get them in the groove of it. So when is it happening this year? Or did it already happen this year?
It did happen May 4 to 7 in Jewel, Republic, and Smith counties.
Okay. So is it about that same time every
It's
year?
only the first weekendish, first Saturday in May.
Okay.
Here it will be in Ellsworth and Lincoln counties, plus the community of Lucas.
Okay.
And it's a more simple format. We were also wearing out our sampler festival hosts.
Mm.
It was getting harder on the hosts, and we saw that, and we didn't want to contribute to sucking the life out of them. We wanted to give life.
Right.
And though it was always good for a community, it was hard on them, the festival. And
Yeah.
this format is easier.
Yeah. Yeah. So is that how you kind of like put those pieces together? It was seeing the strain on the hosts and, you know, how deep do the roots go of the experience that we're able to create when they only come into one place versus if they would go, you know, see the stone bridge that's 12 miles that way, or like whatever it is that, you know, they should actually go see it, stand there and take it in.
Yeah, exactly. So we say it's all about the pie, but for this example, I'm going to say it's all about the kolaches. So Cuba, Kansas could have had a booth at the Kansas Sampler Festival and given out a brochure or even small samples of the kolaches you can get at Betty's Cafe in Cuba, population 150. But they were part of the Big Kansas road trip this year. Wendy and I went into Betty's on Thursday, and she on Wednesday, the day before it all started, and she showed us the big pan of kolache she had made, and she was hoping to sell this whole big pan. Well, after the first day, she had to wake up. She woke up at 4:30 every morning because she was overwhelmed with people coming in to buy kolaches. And the way it's about the kolaches, you can read about them, pick up a brochure, or you can taste them where they are made in the cafe where they are sold in the town that is home to this cafe. And it makes all the difference in how a person feels about the kolache, Betty's Cafe, Cuba.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Take that times 4 days worth of experiences, and you can imagine that it seeps into your soul about not only supporting small towns, but you just see things differently than you would by a brochure.
Yeah. Well, and to even, you know, one example, to go to a town where there is no grocery store and you kind of put that together and you're like, wait, so where do you buy food? Oh, well, we have to drive 25 miles that way. And then the next time you go to like pop into your store and only like, oh, it's just right down the block or it's just a couple miles away. Like that is a whole different experience now that you have in your mind this person who has to spend an hour and, you know, several gallons of gas and all of that just to go do their grocery shopping. You know, you have like the empathy of that experience now to appreciate your own life and the things that you have access to. You know, we take a lot of things for granted when we don't know how special what we have, you know, how special it really is.
That is so good. I think next year I'm going to do a stump. I have a portable stump. We do a stump game, but I think I'm going to do it in a town, and we're going to talk about things they don't see there. Like you don't see a grocery store here.
Right.
About this. So you just inspired me for a new section of the Big Kansas Road.
Oh my gosh. I love it. And I love it. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I love that.
Yeah. Good.
Because you're right. They'll appreciate their grocery store more, and they'll think about, you know, they might have had the preconception that a town without a grocery store is just nothing.
Mm-hmm.
But they will meet on the Big Kansas road trip. They'll meet people and have experiences in that town that make them feel differently about this small town.
Mhm.
And maybe it doesn't have a grocery store, but these people are fantastic. They
Yeah.
might be thinking.
Yeah.
And somehow they make it work living here.
Yeah.
We want them to take that away too.
Mm. Yeah. Right. There's the work that you're doing. It's for those teeny towns. I think there's also the people taking those road trips, going back to the towns that they live in, maybe with more amenities that they have access to, but with a newfound appreciation for all the services that you have access to, Um, yeah, it's eye-opening, the work you do. It opens people's eyes. I love your shirt. Like, this is perfect. If you think Kansas is boring, you're doing it wrong. You're not looking at it. I love that.
Yeah.
Oh, oh, so good. Well, I feel like this is a great place to leave this first conversation. I have enjoyed learning about your time. I feel like I want to go more into like your elementary school guidance counselor and coaching and like all of that, because I do feel like that is so prevalent in what you do now, the way you care and the way you listen. But possibly we can get into more of that on a future episode. Thank you so much for taking the time to tell us some stories. I've loved it. How was it for you? What was it like?
Well, once again, I will tell you that it's the way you do it. I am a little surprised I told you about the barbell thing and some other things, but I have to trust who's asking me the questions. And you do a really good job listening and asking, making the person you're interviewing feel like you really want to know their story. Because I've been interviewed a lot of times in these 30 years, and sometimes I just want to shut it down in 5 minutes because they're not even looking at you when when you're talking. And
Yeah.
so it was easy for me. I enjoyed it, but I appreciate how you do it.
Well, thank you. And that's where we do get kind of into some wandering tangents, but that's life. And the stories that you did share, I thought did a really good job of painting the picture. When we move forward into the work of our dreams or chasing our passions or whatever, like we don't always do so 100% willingly. It's not always a big parade, celebration, accomplishment, achievement kind of feeling when we have to move into a different chapter of our life. But that doesn't mean that it's not still happening exactly, as it was always kind of meant to unfold. Life gets us where we need to be. And I think your story is so beautiful as far as like the breadcrumbs and the pieces of how it all came to pass. So yeah, thank you for being so open and sharing it with us.
The only thing I would say is someone needs to interview you someday, because your story is pretty
I like my story. It's good.
breadcrumby too.
Yes, it's very breadcrumby. I agree. It still is. Like even with this podcast and the episodes and the guests, and it continues to just kind of one bite at a time. That's really all.
You follow your nose as well.
Exactly. So yeah, at some point coming in the near future, there will be some Carly episodes with
Okay.
with me getting the interview side. But yeah, next time, I mean, feel free to ask me questions. If you have questions right back at me, that's
Oh, okay. I didn't know.
we can
But
wander in all kinds of directions. Why not?
great.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Marci.
You're welcome, Carly. You're
Yeah,
welcome, and we'll talk again.
we sure will.